A quiet weekend morning, a phone that rings and rings with no answer, a concerned husband hundreds of miles away unable to reach his wife and daughter. He calls a close friend and asks her to check on his family. It's just a welfare check routine, nothing to worry about. But when Lori Lindbergh arrives at the Lawrence home in Fairfax, Virginia on that November day in 1994, what she finds will haunt her forever. The front door stands silent. No one answers her knocks. She walks around to the back of the house, her unease growing with each step. Then she sees it. The window screen has been sliced open like an invitation to horror. Lori climbs through the window into the dimly lit interior, calling out for her friend Robin. The house answers with silence except for the soft patter of small feet. 2-year-old Nicole toddles down the hallway, her eyes vacant, her expression eerily blank. As Lori moves deeper into the home, she glances toward the master bedroom and freezes. A large, dark stain spreads across the wall, unmistakable in its meaning. At that moment, Lori realizes she has walked into a nightmare, and somewhere in this house her friend Robin Lawrence is dead. If you want to follow this case to its shocking conclusion, and learn how a single piece of evidence waited nearly 30 years to reveal a killer's identity, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. Robin Ware Lawrence was 33 years old in November 1994. She was an artist and graphic designer, a woman whose creativity touched everyone who knew her. Her home in Fairfax was filled with her artwork, evidence of a vibrant mind and a gentle spirit. Robin was married to Oliver Lawrence, known to friends as Ollie or Ali, and together they were raising their daughter, Nicole, a precious child who had already faced more medical challenges than most adults endure in a lifetime. Nicole, just 2 years old, had undergone a liver transplant and required daily immunosuppressive medications to prevent her body from rejecting the organ that kept her alive. The little girl's fragile health made her entirely dependent on constant care and attention. For Robin, motherhood meant not just love, but vigilance, a never-ending watch over her vulnerable daughter. The thought of Nicole being left alone, unable to care for herself, unable to understand what had happened, would become one of the most haunting aspects of what was about to unfold. In mid-November 1994, Ollie Lawrence was away on business in the Bahamas. It was a routine trip, the kind of separation many families endure. He called home regularly to check on Robin and Nicole, maintaining that connection across the miles. But on the evening of Friday, November 18th, something changed. Robin wasn't answering the phone. The house stood silent. Hour after hour, Ollie's calls went unanswered, each ring echoing into empty space. By Saturday, his concern had transformed into genuine alarm. The last confirmed contact with Robin occurred around 6 in the evening on Friday, November 18th. Investigators would later estimate that the attack on Robin Lawrence happened approximately 3.5 hours later, around 9:30 that night. For roughly 48 hours, Nicole was alone in that house, with her mother's body a reality almost too painful to comprehend. Unable to reach his family and desperate for answers, Ollie contacted Lori Lindbergh, a close family friend, and asked her to go to the house. On Sunday, November 20th, Lori made the drive to Fairfax. What should have been a simple check-in became the discovery that would launch a decades-long investigation. When Lori arrived at the Lawrence home, she found all the front doors locked and no response to her knocking. Growing worried, she circled to the back of the property. There she noticed that a screen on one of the windows had been deliberately cut. The opening was large enough for someone to climb through. Lori made the decision to enter the home, perhaps hoping against hope that Robin was simply sick or injured and unable to come to the door. Inside the house was dim and still. Then Nicole appeared, walking slowly through the hallway. The little girl's eyes seemed glazed, her expression disconnected from reality. She moved like a small ghost through her own home, and Lori immediately knew something was terribly wrong. As she moved further into the house and looked toward the master bedroom, Lori saw evidence of violence, signs that no amount of hoping could explain away. She immediately called 911, her voice shaking as she tried to explain what she had found. When police and emergency personnel arrived, they discovered a scene of shocking brutality. Robin Lawrence had been attacked with extreme violence. The medical examiner would later determine that she had been stabbed 49 times. The attack was ferocious, personal, and sustained. Robin had fought for her life, evidence of her struggle visible throughout the crime scene. Several details at the scene raised immediate questions. The phone line had been cut, suggesting that the killer wanted to prevent Robin from calling for help. Throughout the house, investigators found baby wipes with blood on them scattered in various locations. The heartbreaking theory emerged that young Nicole, unable to understand what had happened to her mother, had tried to help in the only way a 2-year-old could imagine, using wipes to clean the blood. Perhaps trying to wake her mother or make her better. An empty baby bottle was found near the crime scene area, another reminder of the child who had been present throughout this horror. Yet, despite the violence of the attack, nothing of value appeared to be missing from the home. Robin's possessions remained where they belonged. There were no signs of burglary or theft. This detail shifted the investigation's focus almost immediately. If robbery wasn't the motive, then this was something else. Something personal, something targeted, something that suggested the killer either knew Robin or had specifically chosen her for reasons investigators couldn't yet understand. In any murder investigation, police must first look at those closest to the victim. Statistics bear this out, the uncomfortable truth that most people are killed by someone they know, often someone they love. When investigators learned that Ollie Lawrence had been involved in an extramarital affair, suspicion naturally fell on him. The marriage had its complications, its secrets. Could those secrets have led to murder? Detectives traveled to the Bahamas to verify Ollie's alibi. They checked flight records, hotel registrations, and witness statements. They interviewed the woman with whom Ollie had been involved. The investigation was thorough and methodical. In the end, the evidence was clear. Ollie Lawrence could not have been physically present at the time of his wife's murder. He was eliminated as a direct suspect in the killing itself. Robin's family would later state that they never believed Ollie was responsible, despite the complications in his marriage. With the husband cleared and no obvious suspects emerging from Robin's social circle, the investigation began to stall. The violence of the crime suggested rage and intimacy, but there was no clear connection to anyone in Robin's life. The case appeared headed for the cold case files, another unsolved tragedy, another family without answers. But there was one small piece of evidence that would wait patiently for science to catch up. During the initial crime scene investigation, forensic technicians had been meticulous in their collection of evidence. In the bathroom, they noticed a small brownish stain on a washcloth or hand towel. Testing confirmed it was blood. More importantly, DNA analysis revealed that this blood did not belong to Robin, to any family member, or to anyone known to be legitimately in the house. The logical conclusion: this was the killer's blood. Perhaps he had cut himself during the attack. Perhaps Robin had fought back and injured him. However it got there, that small stain represented the killer's genetic signature. The DNA profile was entered into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, a national database of DNA profiles from convicted offenders and crime scenes. Investigators waited for a match. Weeks turned into months, months into years. The DNA sat in the database, a genetic fingerprint searching for its owner. But no match came. The killer, whoever he was, had no prior criminal record that required DNA submission. He remained a ghost, defined only by his genetic code. As the years passed, the Robin Lawrence case grew cold. New cases demanded attention. Detectives retired. The file gathered dust. Nicole grew up without her mother, carrying the trauma of that November night, even if she couldn't consciously remember it. The Lawrence family lived with an absence that never healed a murder without a name, a killer who walked free. Then, in the late 2010s, forensic science experienced a revolution. The rise of consumer DNA testing websites, where people could upload their genetic data to find relatives and trace their ancestry, opened up an entirely new avenue for solving cold cases. This technique, called genetic genealogy, had captured national attention with the arrest of the Golden State Killer in 2018. If it could identify a serial killer who had terrorized California for decades, perhaps it could identify Robin Lawrence's killer. In 2019, investigators contacted Parabon Nanolabs, a company specializing in genetic genealogy for law enforcement. They provided the DNA sample from the washcloth and asked Parabon to build a family tree. The process involves uploading the crime scene DNA to public genealogy databases like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. Genetic matches, and then painstakingly tracing family trees backward and forward to identify the person who left the DNA behind. Parabon's initial assessment was not encouraging. The genetic matches were distant in the range of 4th to 6th cousins. The match list contained approximately 1,500 names. Building a family tree from such distant connections would require extraordinary effort and expertise. Parabon warned that this case might be unsolvable through genetic genealogy. But then a volunteer genealogist named Liz offered to take on the case. She would work without pay, driven by the same sense of justice that motivates many in this field. Liz took the list of 1,500 distant genetic relatives and began the painstaking work of building family trees, tracing lineages looking for common ancestors, and then following those ancestral lines forward to identify living descendants who might be the killer. This is detective work of a different kind. It requires patience, skill, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. Liz worked for years building trees branch by branch, eliminating possibilities, narrowing the field. In 2021, Parabon created a composite image of what the killer might look like based on his DNA, a technique called DNA phenotyping. The image showed a white male with certain facial features predicted by his genetic markers. It was another piece of the puzzle, though not conclusive on its own. By August 2023, Liz had a name. After years of work, after tracing countless family lines and eliminating hundreds of possibilities, she had identified a man whose genetic profile and family history fit the crime scene DNA. His name was Stephen Smirk. Stephen Smirk lived in Niskayuna, New York, a comfortable suburb near Albany. He was by all outward appearances an ordinary man living an ordinary life. His criminal record was spotless, not even a traffic ticket. He had served in the military years earlier, but had long since returned to civilian life. Nothing about his public persona suggested violence or criminal behavior. He was the kind of person who disappears into the background of everyday life, unremarkable and unnoticed. On August 3, 2023, two investigators from the Fairfax County Police Department drove to Niskayuna. They did not call ahead. They did not warn Smirk they were coming. They simply arrived at his door and knocked. When Smirk answered, they identified themselves and explained that they were investigating a cold case from the 1990s. They asked if they could come inside and speak with him. Smirk agreed. What happened next was, in the words of the investigators, deeply unsettling. Smirk showed no surprise at their presence. He asked no questions about why police from Virginia would travel all the way to New York to speak with him about a case nearly 30 years old. He didn't ask what case they were investigating or why they thought he might have information. He simply stood there, his face expressionless, and waited. The investigators later described his demeanor as stone-faced, a blank calm that seemed inappropriate for the situation. The investigators asked Smirk if he would be willing to provide a DNA sample. He agreed without hesitation. They swabbed the inside of his cheek, collected the sample, and prepared to leave. They had what they needed. Now it was a matter of waiting for the lab to confirm what they already suspected, that Stephen Smirk's DNA would match the blood on the washcloth from Robin Lawrence's bathroom. The investigators checked into a hotel to wait for the lab results. Later that evening, Smirk called them. He told them he was at the police station and wanted to turn himself in. The investigators told him the station was closed for the evening. Smirk then called 911. The recording of that call is chilling in its calm. "I'm here to confess to a cold case," he told the dispatcher, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. The investigators returned to the police station to conduct a formal interview. They were cautious, aware that false confessions do occur, and that they needed details only the real killer would know. They did not feed Smirk information. Instead, they asked him to tell them what happened on November 18, 1994. Smirk's account was detailed and specific. He said that at the time, he was 22 years old and stationed at Fort Myer in Arlington, Virginia, just a short drive from Fairfax. On the night of the murder, he had been drinking beer and had taken ephedrine, a stimulant. He described feeling an overwhelming compulsion, an urge that he could not control. He needed to kill someone. He drove to a residential neighborhood and selected a house. He did not know the people who lived there. He had no connection to Robin Lawrence. He went to the back of the house and entered through the deck area. He wore a mask and gloves. Once inside, he encountered Robin and attacked her. The details he provided matched the crime scene evidence details that had never been made public. When investigators asked about his motive, Smirk made a statement that sent chills through the interview room. "I'm a serial killer who only killed once," he said. It was a bizarre claim, self-aggrandizing, yet oddly diminishing at the same time. He seemed to be trying to cast himself in a particular light, to claim a notorious identity, while simultaneously acknowledging that he had not, in fact, become the prolific killer he imagined himself to be. Forensic psychologists and former FBI profilers, who later reviewed the case, expressed skepticism about Smirk's claim of randomness. The level of preparation, the selection of a house in a residential area, the tools he brought, all suggested planning rather than a spontaneous impulse. Some experts theorized that this was what is called a mission-oriented homicide, where the killer believes he is fulfilling some kind of purpose or destiny. Others noted that the extreme violence of the attack, the 49 stab wounds, suggested a rage that went beyond random selection. But without additional evidence or more cases to compare, these remain theories. The forensic evidence, however, was not theoretical. The DNA sample taken from Stefan Smirk was analyzed and compared to the blood from the washcloth found at the crime scene in 1994. The match was conclusive. The statistical probability that the blood came from someone other than Smirk was infinitesimally small, beyond any reasonable doubt. After nearly 30 years, the ghost had a name and a face. Stefan Smirk was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Robin Lawrence. Facing overwhelming DNA evidence and his own confession, Smirk entered into a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The plea deal spared him a potential death sentence but ensured he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. In court, the judge sentenced Stefan Smirk to 70 years in prison. For Robin's family, the moment was bittersweet. They finally had answers. They knew who had killed Robin and stolen her from their lives. But many of them had hoped for a full trial, a public airing of all the evidence, a chance to confront Smirk and hear every detail of what he had done. The plea agreement gave them resolution, but denied them that final confrontation. Nicole, who had been just 2 years old on that terrible November night in 1994, was an adult by the time her mother's killer was identified. She had grown up with the absence of her mother, with questions that couldn't be answered, with a trauma she could not fully remember, but that had shaped her life nonetheless. The resolution of the case could not give her back her childhood or her mother, but it could give her something else, the knowledge that the person responsible had been held accountable. This case stands as a testament to several crucial principles in criminal justice. The first is the power of modern forensic science. DNA technology that didn't exist in 1994 eventually solved a case that had gone cold for decades. The careful preservation of evidence, even a small stain on a washcloth, made that possible. Had that evidence been lost or degraded, Stefan Smirk might never have been identified. The second lesson is the importance of persistence. Investigators never closed this case. They kept the evidence. They continued to look for answers. When new technology became available, they were ready to use it. The volunteer genealogist Liz spent years of her life building family trees for a woman she had never met, driven by the belief that every victim deserves justice and every family deserves answers. The third lesson, perhaps the most important, is that justice has no statute of limitations. 29 years passed between Robin Lawrence's murder and Stephen Smirk's arrest. For nearly 3 decades, he lived a normal life, while Robin's family lived with loss and unanswered questions. But in the end, the truth emerged. The debt was paid. Robin Lawrence was an artist, a mother and a human being whose life had value and meaning beyond the terrible way it ended. She created beauty in the world. She loved her daughter. She deserved to live a full life to watch Nicole grow up to grow old with the people she loved. That was taken from her on a November night by a stranger who broke into her home and made a choice that destroyed multiple lives. The resolution of this case offers some measure of peace, but it cannot restore what was lost. It cannot give Nicole back her mother or give Robin back her life. What it can do is affirm a fundamental principle that even when cases go cold, even when years pass without answers, the pursuit of justice continues. Evidence waits. Technology advances. Dedicated people keep working. And eventually the truth has a way of coming to light. This is the story of Robin Lawrence and the long road to justice. It's a story about the power of science, the dedication of investigators, and the volunteers who work without pay or recognition because they believe in the fundamental rightness of holding people accountable for their actions. It's a story about a little girl who survived, but lost her mother and a family that never gave up hope for answers. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to base your reflections on the facts as they've been presented through the legal process. And if you want to stay updated on this case and other mysterious and haunting true crime stories, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. These stories matter, these victims matter, and together we can make sure they are not forgotten. Justice delayed is not justice denied, but it is justice that comes at a cost. For families waiting years or decades for answers, the wounds remain open, the healing incomplete. Robin Lawrence's case reminds us that preserving evidence, advancing forensic science, and never giving up on cold cases are not just procedural matters, but moral imperatives in a society that values both life and accountability.